As you heard from Francis Burstow this morning, the ESRC is the UK's largest organisation for funding research and training in economic and social sciences. It is our aim to support your development to become the very best social science researchers of the future. So by providing these opportunities to you, it demonstrates our commitment to ensuring that the research resources and training is available for you to develop your skills and professional academic development. The first scheme I'm going to speak to you about is the Overseas Institutional Visits Scheme. This scheme is one of the mechanisms in which the ESRC supports its postgraduate students to engage internationally. It provides students with the opportunity to apply for financial assistance to visit an overseas institution or an esteemed research organisation, and is a fantastic opportunity for establishing new networks, disseminating early research findings. It gives you a way to participate in seminars and other academic activities that are directly relevant to your research, and sometimes to undertake specialist training that's not available to you in the UK. This is the point where I'm going to introduce Bonni Crawford, who has recently undertaken an overseas institution visit, and she's going to just go over her experiences with you.
Thank you. As you can see, I'm Bonni Crawford, and I went on an overseas institutional visit to this lovely place, which is the Swiss Centre for Effective Sciences in Geneva. So just briefly to give you some context as to what I was doing there. My PhD is concerned with social reward and punishment processing. By social rewards, I mean things like people smiling at you, saying nice things, including you, and punishments are things like people frowning at you, ostracizing you, criticizing you. So I look at individual differences in those and associated personality traits, and I use functional brain imaging along with social psychological techniques to investigate these things. So my visit was to the Swiss Centre for Effective Sciences, as I said, in Geneva in Switzerland. And I chose it because it's the first and certainly the biggest centre in the world for studying emotion and effective sciences in an interdisciplinary way. So it pulls together something like 200 scientists from around the world with different backgrounds ranging from philosophy all the way through to computer science and engineering. So within that massive interdisciplinary group, I was in a slightly less massive, but still pretty massive lab group called the Laboratory for Behavioral Neurology and Imaging of Cognition. And this was my supervisor there, Patrick Voulemière, who's the director of this. So it is a lab group, but it's not like a lab group that I'm used to. So lab groups here in Cardiff tend to range from, I don't know, mine is 3 people big, pretty much, to about 10 people big, whereas Patrick's group has about 50 people in it. So it was an amazing opportunity for me to collaborate with all sorts of different people with different backgrounds and different takes on the kind of research I'm doing. In particular, my main collaborator was Marcel Meyer, who does research on psychological and neurobiological mechanisms associated with emotion regulation, so controlling negative emotions. And he looks at 2 different ways of doing that. So compassion-focused is where you think, okay, that person was nasty to me, but maybe it was just because they're having a bad day, versus benefit-focused, which is more of an individualistic thing, thinking, okay, that person was nasty to me, but I've realized I'm stronger for it. So this kind of thing has not been within the scope of my PhD, but it's highly relevant to a lot of my findings. So it was really exciting to be able to go forward with some incidental findings of my PhD and have this extra 3 months where I could explore these intriguing findings that I'd found that were kind of leading me down this route of emotion regulation, even though I didn't have time within my main bulk of PhD to do it. So that was fantastic. The project was, it was amazingly interdisciplinary and cutting edge. So just very briefly, there's some kind of novel findings that, well, it's quite well established, sorry, that physical pain and social pain, like the pain of rejection, activate the same regions in your brain. And a slightly more seemingly crazy finding is that it can also make you feel physically cold. And conversely, if you think nice, warm thoughts about people, that can make you feel physically warmer. Okay, you might think that's just psychological, but it seems possible that when you think these nice, warm thoughts, you actually might raise your body temperature in real life, because people, when they're thinking these nice, warm, compassionate thoughts, can withstand greater cold, like they can put their hands in icy cold water for longer than people who are just thinking control thoughts. So, as I said, I found some kind of incidental findings in my PhD to do with collectivistic thinking versus individualistic thinking, and people's social attitudes and traits, which seem to tie in very nicely with the project that Marcel was just embarking on to do with this compassion-focused versus benefit-focused reappraisal I mentioned. So compassion-focused reappraisal is intuitively a warmer, more collectivist kind of way of dealing with emotion regulation. So we came up with this slightly wacky hypothesis that if you're more of a collectivist thinker, more of a compassionate focused reappraisal type person, and when you engage in these things, maybe you raise your body temperature. It sounds wacky. It probably is wacky. I don't know if we'll find anything. We haven't done the final data analysis yet. But the amazing thing about the Swiss Centre for Effective Sciences is that they have the technology and the funding and interdisciplinary expertise to address these kind of cutting-edge questions. So that was the main focus of my OIV, was to conduct this research project using thermography, which is thermal imaging which can pick up minute fluctuations in human body temperature. So as I said, it was quite exciting looking at these mind-body connections and different levels of analysis. So one thing that my experience of the OIV has taught me that I would like to share is that you can't just switch on a project, not this kind of project anyway, for 3 months and then switch it off again. So although my visit lasted for 3 months, the idea was kind of formed in 2013. It was first, the idea of potentially collaborating was first born in April 2013 when Patrick Vollemier came over to do a talk and I met with him. And then in the early part of 2014, Marcel and I were setting up the project. We had to translate scales into French and do all sorts of things that would have been very time-consuming had I not done any of them till I got there. So while I was in Geneva, we set up the pilot work. No one's ever done this kind of thing before, so it did require a fair bit of pilot work. Once we analysed the data, we had to refine the project a bit more and recruit people for further piloting, that kind of thing. So that was the majority of what we were doing on the project, but there were also lots of other opportunities to get involved in different things that were going on, and I presented my research and attended lots of seminars and things as well. It was just really cool working in the big lab. And the data collection is still ongoing in Geneva. It's nearing end point now, and Marcel and I will collaboratively analyse it. Obviously, he can just email it over and I can analyse it here, so the collaboration's ongoing, which is great. So in terms of my skills development, I've kind of touched on it already, the fantastic technological expertise that they've got over there. So this is Neem, who's a very highly qualified engineer who's in charge of all of the technology there. So this was just during our training phase when Neem was teaching us to use the equipment. But he's also in charge of their very cool virtual reality setup over there, which I hadn't really thought of using virtual reality in social psychology research before. But I participated in some pilot studies and helped out, and it's actually amazing how much more immersive it is than kind of asking people just questionnaires or giving them stimuli on a computer screen of social faces and things like that. So that's motivated me to think a bit more expansively and maybe ambitiously about future research projects and getting involved in virtual reality development and so on. So that's the research side of what I was doing over there. And I'd also just like to talk to you briefly about what it's like living in a different country for 3 months. So Geneva's a beautiful place to live, very friendly, it's on the lake, the public transport's amazing. But one thing I had to get used to was that the supermarkets close at 7 p.m. and they're closed on Sundays. So I'm used to working like 10 to 6, popping to the supermarket on my way home after work. Didn't really happen in Geneva. So I had to slightly reorganize my daily routine and get used to either shopping in the morning or thinking in advance about what I was going to buy for the week. Well, Geneva's, so for the weekends, Geneva's absolutely wonderful if you like hiking, which luckily I do. It's surrounded by mountains and vineyards and obviously the lake, and the buses go everywhere. So this is me on top of Geneva's local mountain, Mont Salève, and up in the Alps with some friends. But another thing I had to adapt to, which I found a bit more difficult than the supermarket thing, was the way that social life is organised there. So I don't know if this is a particularly British thing or what, but I'm used to having lots of opportunity to make friends at work and to socialise with people at work or with people from work but outside of work. In Geneva, there seems to be more of a work-life distinction, so people kind of come into the office. You might go for lunch with people in your office, but then you go home, which I found a bit difficult to get used to, especially before I worked out how you actually socialise in Geneva, which turns out to be on this social networking platform called Glocals. So there's my profile. Once I'd figured this out, I got one. And then you can join all sorts of social groups, like backgammon group, hiking group, Scrabble group, going out for curry group, whatever you like. And you meet new people all the time. And anytime you want to go out, you can just look at what's happening that evening. And if something takes your fancy, go along. So you meet loads of new people, and it's really nice. Yeah, I'm not sure if I would go for that. I would think I'd prefer a bit more socialising at work as well. But we did go for lunch at work and we had an absolutely superb canteen, so I can't really complain. Views out over the Alps and Lake Geneva is a bit more swanky than the canteen in Cardiff. And everyone, it wasn't like people were unfriendly. Everyone was lovely and very welcoming. It's just, as I said, a different culture. So I was included on the email Christmas list from the lab, which was absolutely lovely. And there's, as I said, ongoing collaborations and research networks and friendly ties formed there. So overall, I'd say it was a really positive experience and got me thinking in new and more expansive ways about how to conduct research in social psychology / social neuroscience. So I would like to thank the ESRC for the fabulous opportunity, as well as Patrick Villermier and Marcel and everybody at LabNIC in Geneva for making me so welcome, and Andrew Lawrence, my supervisor in Cardiff, for being supportive as well. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Bonni. Just to highlight with the Overseas Institutional Visits Scheme, although it's been running since 2008, in 2014 we devolved the scheme to our DTC network. That means that you can now apply for the Overseas Institutional Visits Scheme directly through your DTC and not with the ESRC. This is to help increase the flexibility of when students are able to undertake an OIV. So if you have any questions about the application or award process, you will need to speak directly with your DTC administrator or DTC contact. So just moving on. In addition to the Overseas Institutional Visit Scheme, I'd like to highlight the Library of Congress. Now, this is a scheme which is administered by the Arts and Humanities Research Council. The ESRC, in collaboration with the Arts and Humanities Research Council, provide ESRC and AHRC funded postgraduate students the opportunity to enhance their project by undertaking a short-term fellowship at the Library of Congress in the USA. This is a prestigious research institution and is also the world's largest library. It has more than 35 million catalogued books and print materials, as well as films, maps, sound recordings in amongst its vast collections. Students can apply to spend up to 6 months at the Library of Congress, and if successful, will receive additional funding, which will contribute towards the flight cost and a monthly living allowance of up to £1,200. in addition to their normal stipend. The scheme is closed for this year. However, as your first year students, you wouldn't have been able to apply, but I would advise that you keep an eye on the ESRC and AHRC's website, because the next round of awards will be advertised later this year, in which will be ideal for you if you would like to consider undertaking this opportunity, because it would be available to you to go during your second year of your PhD. Just moving on. Internships. The ESRC promotes internships for non-academic organisations. Although we value academic internships, we do like to encourage non-academic internship opportunities as well. And this is because we believe that non-academic internships can provide a clear set of benefits, such as networking within the policy arena, building transferable skills and knowledge, things like time management skills, report writing, which will all help contribute to the skills and your professional development. ESRC has run its own internship scheme for many years now. However, we are increasingly encourage the DTCs themselves to introduce and run their own internal schemes. This is to help provide flexibility on the opportunities available to you. So if you are interested in undertaking an internship, I would advise that you speak to your DTC initially to see if they are now running their own scheme. In addition to applying to individual schemes, you can also think about setting up your own internship by using contacts that you may have, developed yourself with a non-academic organisation. Again, I would just advise that you speak with your DTC to see if there's any possible way of getting some funding to help you with an internship opportunity. International internships are slightly more difficult to set up, and is not something that the ESRC has actually managed to do itself. But again, if this is something that you're thinking about considering, I would again advise that you speak to your DTC directly. I'm now going to introduce Dr. Allison Smith, who's from the Cabinet Office. Allison and the Cabinet Office have hosted many ESRC student internships, so as a host, she is going to give you some information on that.
Thank you. I'm Allison. I've been asked to set out some of the organisational benefits of the internship programme. But before I start, I just want to quickly do a bit of context setting for those of you who are less familiar with what the Cabinet Office does. So the Cabinet Office sits at the heart of the government and very much delivers on the Prime Minister's and the Deputy Prime Minister's priorities. So if you look at the coalition agreement that was set in 2010, you will see kind of the structure of the Cabinet Office is very much around delivering those key priorities. So around sort of constitutional matters, around the big society, around sort of transparency and open data. So the Cabinet Office tends to be place that has a lot of contact with number 10 and number 11. So it's high-paced, there's a lot of pressure, but it means you can work on really high-profile pieces of work. And as far as an internship and your PhD, it's a really sort of rich experience on how policy is developed. So what I see are some of the organisational benefits to the Cabinet Office. There's broadly sort of 4 things that I think Cabinet Office benefits from. The first is something that PhD students bring a particular skill set around, and that's critical thinking and analysis of data. And I think this is critically important because it's important for driving more sort of evidence-based policy. I think also PhD students bring a very different perspective because you come from a range of disciplines. So within the Cabinet Office, we have had economists, we have had human geographers, we've had gerontologists, and people from psychology. And they bring a very different and fresh perspective to how we might solve a policy challenge or a policy problem. Hopefully, through being sort of part of the internship program, it creates more engaged citizens. You know, the trends are that people feel really kind of less engaged with the political process and governments. And hopefully by doing your internship within this context, you get a better understanding for how policy is formed, how policy is designed, but also what goes on behind the scenes as far as within sort of ministerial meetings and how ministers make decisions, and also the relationship between civil servants, officials, and ministers as well can be really insightful. And then also general parliamentary process that goes on, that people don't sort of always appreciate what goes on behind the scenes. So the work it takes civil servants in preparing, say, the Prime Minister or ministers for parliamentary questions in the House, or freedom of information requests that we get in, or letters of correspondence by the public is really insightful as to what sort of the general public care about. I think also what's really important, certainly from my perspective, is trying to bridge the gap between academics and policymakers. And I certainly hope the internship program sort of starts to do some of that. So after your 6 months, hopefully go back to academia or whatever sort of career you choose to go on to, and you kind of think about how that influences, how your research influences perhaps the design of policy. Also how you communicate that message, because I originally came from an academic background into government, and I very much had to change how I conversed with ministers, also wrote ministerial briefings. So taking almost academic language in a very lay term, and also what are the critical messages you need to deliver to ministers. They have a certain amount of time. What are the 3 key things from a report or a finding or an intervention you want to make sure that the minister understands? I just wanted to set out for you, just to bring it to life a bit, and then my colleague Nicola will give you much more of a flavour of her experience as a PhD ESRC intern. So there's broadly kind of 2 types of roles within the Cabinet Office that we seek internships for. One is more kind of pure sort of analysis within our analysis team. So the type of things you would do is look at either primary or secondary sort of data analysis. These are big data sets, so census, it could be the community life survey, it could be the people survey that we do within the Cabinet Office, or it could be looking at some of the interventions that Cabinet Office fund and look at how we put in an impact evaluation. So some of the tasks that you would do is analysis, evaluation design, report writing, and then also press releases as well. Probably the biggest number of interns we've had is very much around our social policy teams. So we've had interns in the youth policy team, to social action / the big society, and then also social finance, so social impact bonds as well. And within this, as far as some of the activities you do, it could be new project scoping, it could be project management or grant management, it could be dealing with stakeholders, quite senior level stakeholders, and achieving buy-in for a particular policy change. It could involve briefing a minister, also correspondence and parliamentary questions as well. So these are probably the more sort of typical types of roles or opportunities that would be available to you. I just wanted to give you a flavour of some of the ESRC interns over the year and what they worked on, as far as giving you a flavour of some of the activities that they've delivered on. So one of them is this idea of Care Bank. I don't know if anyone's sort of familiar with it. It's a small pilot that we started in a London borough called Windsor and Maidenhead, which is very much a new approach to social care. It's borrowed on a Japanese model, which looks at time credits for social care. So if you do a favor for For your neighbour, you earn a time credit that you can either save to cash in later when you might need a bit of support, or you can use it to trade for sort of local activities and services. So this is a model that we're trying. It's a new, quite innovative model. It's potentially one of the approaches to how we address some of the challenges that we face around social care. So one of our ESRC interns did a lot of work around the scoping out of this project, looking at the evidence base, and also how we sort of implement this within kind of a pilot phase. Another program that we launched last year is this idea of Step Up to Serve, which is a campaign around supporting youth social action. So it includes things like the National Citizen Service, which there's recent ads on the TV, maybe some of you have seen that, the Duke of Edinburgh Awards. So it's bringing all that together to say to young people, look, these are some of the opportunities that are available for you to get engaged in your communities. And then also something that I think Nicola is going to talk about is the Dementia Friends campaign. Hopefully most of you have seen that campaign. The aim is to create more dementia-friendly communities. It's again borrowed on a Japanese campaign. And we hope to achieve 1 million dementia friends. And these are all programs that ESRC interns have been involved with. So that gives you kind of a flavor of what you can potentially expect. To really sort of give you a much richer perspective, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Nicola, who her last day in the Cabinet Office is tomorrow. So she's actually been with us a year. She was so beneficial, we begged the ESRC to keep her on. I'll hand over to Nicola now.
Thanks, Allison. I've got a lot to thank Allison for, seeing as she did my interview, and that's why I'm here today. So I started in the Cabinet Office a year ago. I'm actually a PhD student at Swansea University in the Centre for Innovative Ageing. I always really wanted to do this kind of thing, to do an internship or get some work experience elsewhere, because I wasn't sure whether I wanted to stay in academia or I really wanted to kind of get a flavour of kind of what other things were out there. It was really great to kind of have this opportunity. So it was the opportunity to spend up to 6 months in a non-academic organisation. So I did an application, and then I kind of went for an interview, and then I started back in January. So it extended the ESRC award, so I continued to get paid my bursary, and it extended that another 6 months beyond, and all my kind of travel and accommodation costs were covered, which was great because I was in London and wouldn't have been able to do it otherwise. So I'll kind of go more into this a bit later, but it just really allows you to develop new skills, build networks, kind of get experience in a different working environment. And it was also great because it was a kind of 6-month break from your PhD, so it kind of allows you to step back from that, kind of go back to it, which I'll have to do next week, with fresh eyes, really. So I worked in the social action team, which sits within the Office for Civil Society in the Cabinet Office. So the Office for Civil Society is everything third sector, so charity, voluntary organisations, social enterprises. The social action team, social action is about people coming together and to solve the problems that are important to them. So the social action team really kind of tests different models of social action. So it's anything from kind of very formal volunteering right up to kind of the big lunch or cooking an extra portion for a neighbour who, might not be mobile. So it was a really unique opportunity because it's very much about kind of evidence building, research, testing these different kind of models and seeing what works. And that was based across kind of main strands, including health, ageing and care, which Allison used to head up with, where I predominantly worked, as well as rehabilitation, youth, community action, which was very much kind of about that grassroots level. So the day-to-day, a lot of it was kind of grant management, so I kind of oversaw a community energy fund, so it was making sure that the kind of the money was going out on time and kind of the different quarters that they were reaching those KPIs. But it was also about kind of any additional support that we could give them, as well as kind of holding focus groups, kind of capturing that learning, sharing that learning, and pulling together findings from all the different projects. So it was kind of having that oversight, which is great because that's really kind of helps you with skills such as kind of project management, grant management, as well as kind of stakeholder engagement, and kind of that kind of communication. It was also the scoping and setting up of new funds. So this summer, the kind of head of our team came to us and said, we kind of want to launch 2 new grant funds, one about carers and kind of one around long-term conditions, kind of health more broadly. So that was right, okay, where can social action really play a part here? What's the kind of best thing we can do? So that was a lot of speaking to a lot of experts in the sector, academics, research organisations. So that was really, really interesting to kind of be involved in that. And then, yeah, kind of the design and setup of that fund, the launch of that fund. Really intense, a lot of work, a lot to do in a very short amount of time, but really, really good to be involved. It's also kind of beyond that, just the kind of day-to-day job. It's that opportunity to attend kind of different events and workshops. So the civil service is quite good at that. There's lots of kind of training, lots of different things going on, and that, you know, I was really encouraged to kind of get involved with and really have that kind of experience. And because I knew I was only there for a set amount of time, I really wanted to get involved in different things that were going on. Yeah, it's also obviously that personal and career development. It's really, really good to work in a different kind of environment. The Cabinet Office, like Allison said, it's very fast-paced, it's quite intense. And initially it was quite hard to adjust to that, but it's great to be able to kind of work in a different way, in a different environment, in a different culture. And that's really, really valuable. And there's also obviously the kind of political side of it, so correspondence, briefing, freedom of information requests, so it's kind of good to get an insight into that, how that works, what goes on. And then obviously working in a team, which, yeah, I suppose at times kind of PhD can feel quite, you're on your own, and it's been really great to work in a team for a year, bounce ideas off people, and kind of work in that kind of way. So yeah, so these are just kind of a couple of examples from the health agent and care team. So I worked on kind of the Dementia Friends with Alzheimer's Society, and also Public Health England and Department of Health work on that now. And also kind of King's volunteers, so helping in hospitals. So they're just kind of a few examples of kind of what the team did. So the research and evidence side of it. So this was obviously really interesting for me, and I was really fortunate to work in a team that really had this emphasis on kind of testing kind of different models and kind of gathering evidence. So I'm just going to kind of briefly talk through one of the funds that we set up in the summer, which was the End of Life Fund. So this is using social action to support people at the end of life, and kind of improve that kind of quality of life at the end of their life. And we were really keen to kind of make sure that we built the evidence around this. So very early on, we kind of had conversations with various research organisations and academics. And we've got kind of the Institute for Volunteer and Research and Lancaster Uni on board to kind of help us with that kind of evaluation. And they're actually running a randomised control trial across 7 different projects. So that's really, really exciting and really interesting. So it was good to kind of see how policymakers kind of work with academics in that way. But it's also, I think, quite good to see behind the scenes and get an insight into the kind of constraints and the challenges that civil servants come across. So kind of working within a kind of certain time frame, working kind of to that budget, kind of the different pressures kind of from the political side. So that was kind of quite interesting to kind of understand and kind of work on a day-to-day with that. And then it's also kind of makes you appreciate what we could do better, how you kind of academics and policymakers could work better together, really. So what did I gain? So it's been an absolutely amazing year. I can't believe it's my last day tomorrow. But I'm really excited to go back to my PhD. My second supervisor's sitting at the back, so really excited. So, I mean, my first week, me and Allison were talking last night, and Allison sent me an email, and I just started, and she said, there's a consultation going on in the House of Lords tomorrow. I think it was Silverline, Esther Ranston. Do you want to come along? So I was like, but I was like, yeah, fine, whatever, yeah, okay. And I was in the House of Lords, the Houses of Parliament, and absolutely amazing, and sitting in on this consultation with all these really important people, just kind of sitting in that and like soaking it all in and thinking, wow, this is going to be a really, really good 6 months. I also got into number 10 and got into number 11 at different kind of events and meetings. And it was also great for me to kind of be based in London, because obviously I'm doing my PhD at Swansea. So if anything ever kind of comes up at every different event, it always seems to be in London, and it's kind of like, oh, it's going to be, even if it's a 2-hour event, it's going to be a day out, and it's a lot of money. So it was great to be there, as well as being a team that were kind of, yeah, great, go and attend that, and kind of feedback to the team about, you know, what was said. And so it was really great just to be based there. And like I said earlier, yeah, great to work in a different environment, in a different way. I mean, there's so much that I've got out of it. I think one of the main ones is, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I'm a bit of a waffler when I write, and I know all of this, and just get it all on the page. But you obviously can't do that with ministers. It's right, bullet points, very clear and precise, and that, I mean, just my writing has got so much better within this year to just be able to kind of get that really focused. And I went back and kind of read over my lit review, and I was like, oh God, I need to cut that out, and I need to cut that out. So just those kind of skills, as well as kind of managing budgets, stakeholder management, the networking, the people that you meet, the jobs that you talk different people, and you know, they tell you what they do, and you think, God, I didn't even know that existed. That sounds really interesting. So definitely that kind of networking, meeting people. And yeah, it just really gives you a taste of another kind of working environment, and it's really, really, you know, valuable insight into different potential careers that you might be interested in doing. And then also it kind of puts some perspective on your PhD, and it makes you really kind of value how great it is to kind of have that time to kind of work on kind of your own piece of work, and kind of give some perspective on that. So I think that's me. Thank you very much. Thank you for the ESRC. It's been absolutely amazing. Thanks for Cabinet Office. Thanks for Allison as well. Thank you.
Thank you both. I think we all agree that that's just given us quite an interesting insight to both the host and the student involved with internships. Just briefly moving on. So, in addition to the opportunities already highlighted to you, the ESRC, in collaboration with the Parliamentary Office of Science and Technology, provides ESRC-funded students with an opportunity to undertake a fellowship at post. This means that you get the opportunity to be seconded into post, where you will assist in producing independent, balanced and accessible analysis of public policy issues of parliamentarians. The scheme is open to all ESRC-funded students in their second and third year of their PhD. So again, it may not seem like it's relevant to you today, but it is open for a few more years, and therefore you will be eligible to apply in the next round of awards. Post not only provide internship opportunities for the ESRC students, they also work with some of the other research councils as well. So there's a very limited number of awards that they can give out. Constant feedback received from students undertaking an internship with Post is always very valuable. They always seem to have a very interesting time, just like Nicola has had at the Cabinet Office. So like I said, the scheme will be running again for the next 2 years, and details of that can be found on ESRC's website and also the Post website. Something slightly different than internships or overseas visits, because they're all quite similar, is I'd like to draw your attention to the ESRC's Advanced Training Network. You may have heard this already. Frances highlighted it this morning in her welcome and introduction speech. This network provides all social science postgraduates with the opportunity to access high-quality advanced training in order to develop their skills whether in their own discipline, a particular research method, or a different research area altogether. All of our DTCs offer a variety of courses which can be found on the National Centres of Research Methods website, and details should also be found on your individual DTC website. This means that postgraduate researchers based within an ESRC DTC or outside of the ESRC DTC network can access this training. And it isn't restricted to ESRC-funded students. So when I say it's for all social science postgraduate students, it really is for all social science postgraduate students. In addition to being able to access these courses, with the help of a bursary funding allocated to the DTCs, if you are looking to attend an advanced training course, you can get help with the attendance fee, and that you should not be charged more than £30 per full day per course that you attend, because the bursary funding allocated helps the DTC to draw down on the cost that they're not charging you. However, if you are attending an advanced training course that is run by your own DTC and is in your own institution, you shouldn't be charged whatsoever. So you should only really be charged if you are attending a course that's outside of your own institution. And we would encourage that you have a look on the National Centre for Research Methods website to see the types of courses that are available, because there's quite a lot out there that are all very interesting. As part of the ongoing development of the Advanced Training Initiative, in 2014 the ESRC also commissioned an open call to all research organisations within the UK to provide additional advanced training courses. This call was designed to augment the current provision available within the existing advanced training network, and has resulted in an additional 9 awards being made. And these awards have not only been made to some of the DTCs, to the institutions involved with the DTCs, several of them were also made to institutions that are not within the DTC network. So again, I would advise that you have a look on the NCRM's website to see if any of these courses are available. If you'd like to know the list of award holders for those particular awards, they are detailed on our own website. And just finally, I just want to highlight the other opportunities and resources that are available to you. The ESRC has a wealth of research resources available from our website. They come from many of our investments, which may help you to undertake your research. These resources include things like surveys, data services, centres, programmes and initiatives, and all of which can be found on our website. I mean, there are some workshops that you'll be undertaking after lunch today, a variety of workshops, and one of which is about longitudinal data, which is something that ESRC invests in. So if you've signed up for that, hopefully you'll find that very useful and interesting. Don't forget your university. There's a wealth of resources available to you within your university. Consider what would be useful to you. For example, who is the person at your university responsible for working with the media? Could they communicate your work to a wider public? At the end of the award, can they give you advice? Can they help you in an area that you may be struggling with or that might be unfamiliar to you? Are there opportunities with the International Office? You know, you can find out whether there are any links with countries you're looking to visit, and to consider how you can maximise the international opportunities available to you. Obviously, there's also a lot of networking events, and we'd like to encourage you to keep networking not only with each other within your own DTC and your own institution within your discipline, but also beyond this. You know, one of the reasons for the conferences is to help students meet each other from across the DTC network and hopefully build some links with one another today. And not necessarily based within your own discipline. You know, we have noticed at these conferences on many occasions that people have forged links with other students in a discipline they never thought was even relevant, but after having a short discussion, they have found that actually their research links quite well together. So make the most of any networking opportunities that are available to you, and make the most of any links that you can make, and enjoy undertaking your studies. So I'm just going to re-highlight that for further information on any of the opportunities highlighted today, you should be able to find information on our ESRC website, or just speak to your DTC directly.
Thank you very much.